Welcome. I'm Rachel Siegel, the Director of Strategic Programs at Illuminate. Welcome back to our Crown Jewel Conversation series. Thank you for joining us today from all over the world. Illuminate is a catalyst for gender justice and social innovation. We invest in the leadership of Jewish women, social entrepreneurs who are devoting their lives to tackling society's most pressing issues affecting women and other marginalized communities throughout the United States, Israel, and around the globe. We are building a global network of changemakers. Each year, we select 10 extraordinary Jewish women leaders. We call them Jewels, Jewish entrepreneurial women executives and leaders to take part in the collective. This cohort-based leadership advancement program fosters connections, encourages partnerships, provides resources, and a curriculum that's tailored to meet their needs. This enables the leaders to maximize their impact. Illuminate is also a philanthropic accelerator dedicated to educating women philanthropists on intentional and strategic giving, providing opportunities to learn about emergent social issues, and leveraging communal dollars to make impactful investments in social change. Philanthropists of all financial capacities and all levels of experience are welcome to join us, no matter where they are physically located. We believe that the integration of activism and philanthropy is essential to creating lasting social change. When you support Illuminate, you not only support 50 organizations run by phenomenal Jewish women, you are part of a movement. Together, we are advancing a deeply feminist response to global social challenges and creating a bright future together. Our conversation today will allow you to get to know one of these incredible women in this movement. Elizabeth Mandel is the founder and executive director of J Girls Plus magazine. She is an accomplished documentary filmmaker, writer, editor, and community activist. Elizabeth has built a successful record using media to raise awareness and create change around social justice, gender, and Jewish community issues. Her award-winning films include Pushing the Elephant and Arctic Sun. Her films have broadcast on PBS and screened at numerous festivals on Capitol Hill, at the World Bank, and in schools and refugee camps throughout the world. Elizabeth worked for the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee in Mumbai, India, and for the United Nations and Asia Foundation, as well as in Japan, Cambodia, and Nepal on a variety of women's security and empowerment projects. She is a contributor of Lilith magazine and has served as an editor of USAID and for the Group on Equal Rights for Women at the United Nations. Elizabeth holds a master's degree from Columbia University in International Affairs with a focus on women's economic and political development. She graduated magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa from Columbia University with a BA in Religion and East Asian Languages and Cultures. It's quite a resume. If, like Elizabeth and Illuminate, you believe in the importance of Jewish, female, and non-binary teens voicing their realities, engaging with new ideas, and lifting each other up, then you are in the right place today. After this conversation, we will open the floor for questions. You can write any questions that you have in the chat or hold them, and you will have the opportunity to ask them later on. For now, we are going to mute everyone to avoid any background noise. We encourage you to turn on your camera so we can see you and eat your breakfast, lunch, dinner, depending on where you are. And now I'm pleased to introduce the president of Illuminate, Rachel Weinstein.
Thank you, Rachel, and welcome, Elizabeth. We have known each other for such a long time. I remember the very first day we met you when you were just launching J Girls Plus magazine. I mean, it feels like maybe it was like 8 years ago, and here we are, and so much has changed, and your organization has grown so much. And I wish we had 3 hours, because after listening to Rachel rattle off your resume and your international work, I wish we had hours and hours and hours to delve into all of it, but we're going to cover a lot of ground quickly. And, let's just start off with a little bit about your background, and specifically, what about your background led you to found J Girls Plus magazine?
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you so much for this incredible opportunity and for everyone for being here today. One of my first grants came from Illuminate, and this project would really, we've been partners for such a long time. This project would not exist without your support. So I'm so grateful for the many years of our relationship and for this opportunity today. So in terms of what led me to start J Girls Plus magazine, I have three children, and when they were little, they were extremely bold in, asserting themselves and in claiming what they need and in voicing their opinions. And I knew that I know from personal experience and just being a human in this world that as girls grow toward their teen years, they absorb the pressures that tell them to be smaller, to be quieter, to not take up so much space. And in the case of Jewish girls, this idea of not taking up space is actually quite literal. We're told straighten your curls, get your nose done, don't gain so much weight, just literally take up less space in the universe. If you're going to raise your hand in class, it shouldn't be like this, it should be kind of like this, because you want to be smart, but you don't want to be too smart. And these pressures for girls and all gender minorities to be smaller and to be quieter are unavoidable. And I wanted to give my own children a place where they would know that as they moved into those teen years, that their voices mattered and that their voices counted. And also that to give them the scaffolding to build a community of peers with whom they shared gender identity and religious/cultural identity, with whom they could be in honest, authentic, raw, trusting relationships and conversations while they were trying to figure out who they were and who they wanted to become in the world. And so out of that grew this idea of providing a platform first where young people could talk about all of the things on their mind. And I should note that the work that we feature on our pages, on our online pages at J Girls Plus magazine, all the content is written by self-identifying Jewish girls between the age and non-binary teens between the ages of 13 and 19. Poetry, short fiction, opinion pieces, photography, art, music, all genres, all media. And they talk, in fact, not only about the intersection of gender and Judaism, but about everything that's on their mind. It really is a platform for them to express their full, authentic selves. And we also, all of the content on our magazine is edited. Our editors and our staff photographers are sophomores through seniors in high school. And in addition to providing this platform, for all of our young creative people, we also provide a very robust feminist leadership training program for our editors and our photographers. And one of the things that we teach them is fundamental to what led me to found this, which is to use their positions of power and their opportunity and their privilege to create space for the voices of those who have been pushed to the side, for those who have been marginalized, to be heard and taken seriously, and be in community with one another, talking about the amazing things they're doing and the struggles and the joys and the horror sometimes of being a teenage young person.
Totally. I'm going to probe you about so many things that you said in there. One is also, obviously your background, played a part into, I would imagine, conceiving this particular
Yeah.
medium for doing this work and for elevating the voices of young people. Can you talk a little bit about how your own personal craft has informed the creation of this space for teens?
Yeah, well, I have two ways that I'd like to answer that. One is my personal background, how I grew up, and then the other is Rachel shared some of my professional journey. So I grew up in a modern Orthodox home. I loved the way that I grew up. I cherish being part of that community and the schooling, the education that I received. And I was fortunate to grow up in a home and in a community where girls were told you can be anything you want to be, and you can do anything you want to do. And we learned alongside the boys. We learned Gemara, Talmud. We learned, all of our Judaic texts. We were studying together with the boys. And I have a mother who is incredibly strong and creative, and outspoken role model for me. And then one day, I was probably 11, and here, I was sort of going through this life, and I was growing up in a traditional modern Orthodox environment, so I saw what the division of labor was when it came to religious ritual, but I felt very empowered as a young person. And then one day, the an administrator came and said, okay, starting today, I was about 11, so 5th grade, 6th grade. Starting today, the boys are going to go learn to read Torah to prepare for the bar mitzvahs, and the girls are going to go to home economics. And that was my moment of Jewish feminist awakening. Like I have a very clear moment of Jewish feminist awakening. And I thought, oh, I really can't be anything I want to be or do anything I want to do. And how do I hold all of these things I care about, and find a way to incorporate them and integrate them? If you were to ask me, what are the top few ways I identify myself, or I self-identify, Jewish and feminist and woman would be in that top few. And how do I live all of those truths and all of those realities at once? And one of the things that I also wanted to give the young people in founding the organization was a place where they could explore, what does it mean to me to be Jewish? What does my gender mean to me? And to do it with people with whom they both shared their identities, Jewish, female identifying, non-binary, but also people who had radically different definitions of what that meant. One of the our work is all online because the young people on our teen staff, the editors and photographers, they come from all over the country. And that was an intentional choice to be able to bring people. We wanted to have as diverse a community as possible. And a piece of that diversity is Jewish diversity and geographic diversity. So for example, one year we had an editor who lived in Riverdale, which is it's a suburb of New York City. It's a very tight-knit, robust, vibrant, modern Orthodox community. And she was in a modern Orthodox Jewish high school. And we had another editor who was from Salt Lake City, the only Jew in her high school. And in fact, she had to change high schools 3 times because the anti-Semitism was so bad. And so they were able to give each other a more expansive view. When you're young and even when you're older, we live in our bubbles, right? And we know the people we know, and those people, we tend to gravitate toward people who are similar for us. This really project gives young people, as they're figuring out who they are, as they're figuring out who they want to be and what these identities around gender and Judaism mean to them, to be exposed to other ways of living those identities, and to be supported as they said, oh, I actually realized that in my community, like the way that I'm living Jewishly, some things work, some things don't. Like, what else is out there? What else? What does it mean to be Jewish beyond what I'm seeing? We had one teen who said to us, as she was graduating off the board, she said, I never realized before I joined J Girls Plus that there were different ways to be a girl from what I was taught. And it wasn't that the way that she was taught was good or bad. It was one way, and here were all of these other ways. So that a lot of wanting to do that grew out of my own experience, and it was a different age. We didn't have the internet. We didn't, it was, but where I only had one model, and how enriched my life would have been, not necessarily because I wanted to live a different model, but just to know what else was out there so that I could make a decision. And then in terms of my career, I spent a long time working in international affairs. My specific portfolio at the Asia Foundation was gender-based violence in Southeast Asia. And then I worked as a documentary filmmaker. Again, the films that I made were focused on social justice and particularly gender justice. And I had my third child, and frankly, I could not make my career in film work anymore. There was the hours and the demands and I couldn't, I don't know how I balanced it with the two, but I got to the three and I couldn't do it anymore. And so I talked about how having three children, how my three children influenced me, but there were also the practical realities of how does a person have a fulfilling career in which they can be completely present and also be present for their kids in the way they want to. The answer is you can't, right? Like we've learned that you in fact cannot have it all. That is a myth. But I did want to model in my career. I wanted to model something in my career choices for my children, and in when I wasn't with them, what I was doing. And to be able to, I hear my kids. One of my kids in particular talk to her friends about the work that I do and how proud she is. And I have to tell this story because it happened last night. My youngest child is 10 going on 11. And last night she said, Mom, she had told this to my husband, and my husband said, Matilda has a story. That's my youngest daughter. Matilda has a story she wants to tell you. She said, Mom, I had a very important conversation today with one of my classmates who didn't know what the patriarchy was. And so I explained it. And, she went on to tell how she explained it. And she said, my friend who's a boy was also very thoughtful because he said, being equal means being equal. It doesn't mean that girls are better. And I also really agree. So I look, my personal life and my professional life, my family and my professional life are totally inextricable from one another. They inform one another. I also, when I started this, my kids were really small. They were, I think, I don't know, 9, 7, and 4. Now I have two kids I have two kids now who are the age of our writers and the age of our editors. And so even more now, like what I have learned, and I learn from the young people I work with every single day, what I have learned from the young people informs my relationship with my kids and my parenting and the things that I talk to about them and my understanding of them. And likewise, I've changed as a professional as I have, a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old in my home. That also, and I understand much more closely what it means to be this age in this age, right? What it means to be 16 in 2023, which is very different from what it meant to be 16 when I was 16.
I think that's so beautiful. And it's honestly one of the things that I love when I'm in conversation with all of you in the collective is you are what you do. Like it's so integral. And so this idea that it informs your parenting and your family life and how your family life informs how you're a leader. I mean, it makes so much sense. And, some people would say like, oh, there's no delineation. And like, to me, it's this wonderful gift to have your lives so seamlessly integrated in that way, and the fullness that it brings to you, as a human being and as a leader. So I really love that. I know you shared a little bit about the work of J Girls Plus magazine, which is this online magazine, and the content that you produce, but can you maybe give us a little bit of color on like, what is the process? Like, how are you recruiting your writers? How do you bring on your editorial board? What's the size of your board? How long are they with you? Just like some of the nuts and bolts about the program.
Yeah, so we recruit the way that one does these days, social media, word of mouth. We really, really treasure our relationships with other organizations working in an overlapping or adjacent space, other organizations that work with creative young people, other organizations that work, feminist Jewish organizations working with teens, trying really like invested in building partnerships with those organizations. I believe really, really deeply that that the Jewish community is not a place of scarcity. It's a place of generosity and largesse, and that the more that all of the organizations that have similar goals work together, rising tide lifts all boats, right? And that we should all we all have similar goals, among them to create feminist leaders, the next generation of feminist leaders. So there's a lot of collaboration with organizations working in similar spaces. Word of mouth, I think, is, we have teens who recruit their friends. One of my favorite recruitment stories is, we had a teen who was with us our first year for 1 year, with whom I'm still in very close relationship. She's now in rabbinical school. And after that first year, she told me, she was a camp counselor. She told me, I went to camp this summer, and I told, and she worked with, I think, 10-year-olds. She said, I told all of my kids about this work, and we had all of these conversations about feminism and feminist leadership and collaboration and, leading through dialogue. And however many, 5 years later, I get this application from this young person saying, and we asked, how did you hear about this? And she says, I heard about this at camp 5 years ago from my counselor. I have been waiting to apply ever since. And she now just completed her second year with us. And actually, we just had our graduation, and she talked about that. She talked about, at the graduation, she talked about first hearing about this. Her name's Hannah. She said, I first heard about this from Audrey in camp all these years ago. So word of mouth, and that's not just like a 16-year-old calling another 16-year-old, right? That's like these young people go out into the world, and that's we're already creating the feminist leadership, right? Because here Audrey has gone and spoken to younger people who are now part of our community. And then, so we accept sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and depending when they join, that's how long they're with us.
Right.
So between 1 and 3 years. The work with we have our editorial board, and then we have our staff photographers, and they meet regularly in adult-free spaces to make decisions around what's going to be published on our website. And it's all very, very deeply supported. It's very, very deeply scaffolded. We run once a month, we run workshops where we bring in outside experts to discuss what is feminist leadership, dialogue across productive civil dialogue across difference, identity. We run workshops on, for example, queer and Jewish, race and racism and the Jewish community, disability justice, and we're also, so we're giving them, leadership tools. We're giving them identity discussion, and we're also giving them skills, photography workshops and editorial workshops. And then they take these skills, and they bring them into the edit room. And what we're saying to them is, you have expertise in being a teenager that we do not have. You're going to choose what your peers want to read. And this is sometimes I will read a piece that comes in and I'll think, this is amazing, I can't wait to publish it. And they will say, nope, we don't want this. And sometimes a piece will come in and I'll say, and they'll say, this is our favorite piece ever, right? Because I'm not a teenager, and I, try my best, but it's not a lived experience for me being a teenager in the second decade of the 21st century. That's not my experience. And so we're telling them that we trust them. We're giving them supported, what one of the alums called it, as much support, as much independence as we want, as much independence as we want, and as much support as we need. And that's, we really try to find that balance, so they don't feel like they're being asked to do something that they don't have the tools or support to do. But we're saying, we're giving you the tools and support, we trust you, and also whenever you need help, come back and ask us. So all of their decisions, an adult staff member, Michelle, who's a professional editor, looks over and helps them figure out, how can we do this in a way that's sensitive, that's productive, that will get us the product that we think will help the young person whose work we're featuring shine, and also help our magazine shine. And so they're each of the editors is in 2 departments: fiction, nonfiction, poetry, etc. So they meet twice a week, just with their peers, and that's where the real community building happens. And what we hear from the young people we work with over and over again is that the workshops are really important and the conversations are really important, but really it's about the community. Oh, and I will also say we hold 1 workshop a month, and we also meet together as an editorial board once a month to discuss business. Not only are they making decisions about what we publish on their site, but they're also making decisions about the direction of the organization. We involve them in small decisions, like, do we want to change the colors on our logo? I don't know, maybe that's not so small. It's just an example. And we involve them in big decisions. What are some of the things that you want to learn next year? What workshops should we bring in? We recently made a change to our name. That was which I can also talk about, but that was a change that was suggested by one of our teens, voted on by our teens, and passed by our teens before we went ahead and we made that change. So, and that's a lot of where the leadership training happens. It's hands-on, right? We're not just running a lecture saying, here's what it means to be a leader. We're saying, okay, here's the lecture, here's what it means to be a leader. And now we're going to implement it with real life experience in a very hands-on experiential way. So they tell us, the community building and the friendships is really the magic of it. And I just think this is so important for so many reasons. It's a self-selecting group, meaning it's people who are literary, creative, curious, dedicated, and some of the young people don't have that community in their school life. So it's a place of respite for a number of our young people. It's a place where they can, for some of them, where they can bring a different side of themselves that, maybe they have one type of community at school, like camp, right? You have different, you can be a different part of yourself in any different, from environment to environment. They discuss ideas, they discuss feminism, and some of our young people have, it's actually amazing. We hear that for some people, their best friends are people they've met on the board. They've never met in person. Or they have not, they for a long time were best friends until they met in person. We do an in-person retreat in the fall, but over COVID we didn't do it. And then, so I don't know what happens in the editorial meetings because teens are, because in the department meetings, because adults are not invited, but whatever happens there, we hear a lot about, I talk about my day and we laugh our heads off, and I, talk about things that I don't have the opportunity to talk about otherwise, and people support me no matter what. We hear a lot of that. We hear, like, I can be my true self because I know this is such a kind community and supportive community. I know this is where I'm going to be supported. And this is important for so many reasons. First of all, why do people show up to anything? They show up to anything. Ultimately, we are social animals, and you show up to things because it brings you, some kind of social fulfillment. So it's, I think, one of the reasons that almost everyone who is eligible for 3 years comes back is because they enjoy being a part of this community. I think it's also really important. I don't, think I have to say too much about the mental health crisis among teens right now, and to have a place where you really feel accepted and understood and supported is beyond value. And it's important because so much about leadership anywhere, including in our Jewish community, is about community weaving and about having a network of other people who support you and who believe in you and who are going to bring you up next to them or along with them. And so one of the visions for the future of this work, which we're starting to see now we're starting to have alums graduate from college and enter the professional world, is for them to have each other. It's a response to the old boys network, right? oh, you work in an industry that I'm interested in. I was a J Girls Plus teen staff member. You're a J Girls Plus teen staff member. I'd love to come in and talk to you about your job, right? I'd love to do an informational interview. Um, and this we see now, we just also at the graduation, one of our young people who just graduated is going to college in a place that turns out is a 10-minute drive from where one of the other people who's still in high school is going. And she reached out to her and she said, anytime you need a Shabbat meal, give me a call. You're 10 minutes from my home. We have an open invitation, right? So they're building these professional networks and they're building supportive personal communities. And I'm not really sure, not only for teens, but for anybody, that there's anything more important than that, both professionally and personally, right? To have that support and to also have people who are going to open doors for you.
Totally amazing. And as you're saying this, I hear so many parallels with our collective, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But you know, when we spoke earlier, you also said about something about, you know, that you're giving them like a space to sort of both grapple with the issues that they're inheriting and also discover themselves and doing those two things in tandem.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and what you're seeing with the girls around those two different sort of growth areas?
Yeah. Well, you know, another reason that I am eager to provide a space for these kinds of tools, decision-making tools, leadership tools, autonomy, independence, is yes, to become leaders, feminist leaders in the Jewish community and elsewhere, but also, you know, as these young people are grappling with the most salient issues of our time, part of that grappling is not theoretical, right? These young people are inheriting a mess, right? Gun violence, climate change, anti-Semitism, you know, the chipping away at women's rights that we thought were enshrined, but apparently are not. You know, the erasing of gender identities, and having the tool, like as these young people are deciding what's important to them, having the tools and the community again to stand with them, to be able to take action and to make decisions and around how they want to show up in the world, in a world in which they face so many challenges. This is also a good opportunity for me to mention we have a new project called Vocal Point, which is a public speaking, it's a Jewish feminist public speaking program. We're launching our first cohort in the fall. We actually have a few spaces left if anyone has young people who they think might be interested in joining us. And we're going to be training the participants ages 16 to 22 in public speaking. And why this project? First of all, we talk a lot when we talk about the magazine about voice, right? The magazine is a space, is a platform for young people to use their voices to talk about what they care about, to stand up for what they believe in. This is literally about voices, right? So that's sort of, you know, the written voice, the artistic voice. This is literal voice. We're training young people to be able to stand up in their communities publicly and say, here's what I think about this issue. So why is this so important? You know, several years ago, there was a push inside the Jewish community by amazing leaders to make sure that there were no more so-called manels, right? That there were no more panels in Jewish spaces that only featured men. Similarly, I think that there should not be panels where we talk about these issues that impact young people so deeply. The mess that we created, you know, this bag of garbage that we created and then handed to them to figure out how to dispose of. How can we be talking about gun violence without including young people? How can we be talking about climate change without involving young people? Both because it impacts them for the rest of the, you know, they've been handed it and it's going to impact their entire futures. And also because as young people who grew up in the information age, in the internet age, they have tools at their disposal in which they are fluent that people of my generation just don't have. They have ideas and they have resources and they have avenues that that if we listen to them will benefit everybody. And as I said earlier, they are also experts in their own lives. They know what they, it doesn't mean that they have all the answers. First of all, none of us have all the answers. And yes, on some issues you have more answers in middle age than when you're 16, but also if you're middle aged, you don't know what it is like to be 16. And so they have an expertise that we need to listen to. And so the goals of Vocal Point is to prepare them so that when they are given an opportunity to speak publicly, that they're prepared to do it. And that my dream is that we find spaces for young people on panels, and adults walk out of those panels and say, why do we ever have panels without young people? When I plan a panel, or and they'll be able to, the placements will be whatever makes sense for them, both in terms of the topic that they're interested in and also in terms of their personalities. It's not necessarily a panel. It could be a leading a workshop in their classrooms. It could be a one-on-one conversation like this at their JCCs or in their synagogues, but that they should have the tools, the knowledge, the expertise, and also the support to be able to get up and talk about what's on their minds and what they see for their futures.
Yeah, amazing. I'm always impressed by this up and coming generation, and not the ideas, the energy, the passion that they have. It gives me great hope. So I love that you are cultivating the leadership in them. So I think this is a good place. I mean, you've alluded to it a little bit as we've sort of been speaking, but I think we could go a little deeper about how gender plays into your work. We talked about who you serve and why in terms of giving them space. You alluded to your name change from J Girls Magazine to J Girls Plus Magazine. So can you tell us a little bit about how gender comes into play, and specifically how you're building your program with gender in mind?
Yeah. How long have you got?
Give us the highlights.
Yeah. So look, the very basis of the organization is built around gender and the ways in which and it started out for girls and has evolved into being a space for all gender minorities, so girls and non-binary and trans and genderqueer young people. And really thinking very deeply about the ways in which gender plays into leadership and decision making in the Jewish community. So first of all, we know that when girls are not given supportive spaces, they begin to doubt themselves. And they begin to, well, absorb all of these messages about, in addition to the be smaller, also, be smart, but not too smart, be just the right amount of attractive and sexy, be just the right amount of, ambitious, be ambitious, but don't be aggressive. And what is demanded of young women, of girls, of women, of young women, it's impossible. We cannot be the things that society tells us that we should be, because how do you be this but don't be this, right? It's impossible. And this really impacts, we see the way that this impacts young people. We see the way that this impacts our community. Something like 70% of top leaders in Jewish organizations are men. And the income disparity, the earning disparity within those organizations between men and women, also, I think it's 80 cents to the dollar. And there's a direct line between the messages that we are sending, not only our girls, but also our boys, about who holds power and who deserves to have power, that plays out in very, very real ways within our community, and also really tears at the fabric of our community. If we're telling members, half of the members of our community, that they are equal but not really equal, it's it rubs against what I see as Jewish values and Jewish ethics, where we're all created in the image of God. We're all created b'tselem Elokim. And so, the very basis of this was to cultivate the voice and provide spaces where young people could feel confident and feel supported and know that it's okay to make a mistake. We talk a lot about failing forward and resilience, and we model it. We don't only talk about it, we also model it in the way that we work. I I joke that I model failure for my teens every single day. Like I make mistakes all the time because I'm a human person. And I don't try to cover it up, and I don't try to pretend that I'm perfect. And I think it's important for girls particularly to see that perfectionism, and this expectation that they're never going to mess up is not a real thing. That competitiveness and perfection, and you have to be exactly all the time, it's impossible. The reason that we fail at being perfect is because perfection is not actually a thing that exists in the world. And the gendered expectations around perfectionism and around achievement really rip away at young people's confidence. So the thinking about gender, and also thinking about what feminist leadership is. Feminist leadership is not women leading. Men can be feminist leaders also. Feminist leadership is thinking about who has stakes in this game, and if I'm in a position of leadership, how can I hear the needs of all of the stakeholders, of all of the constituents? How can I approach the decisions that need to be made collaboratively? How can I, and I talked about this earlier, how can I use my position of power to empower others? Not an old model of leadership of I'm climbing the ladder and I'm kicking the people on the rungs below, but I'm climbing the ladder and I'm sticking my hand down to pull people up along with me. And I think honestly, it benefits everybody. I tell my kids that love is sunshine, not pie, right? Pie, when you eat all the slices, the pie is gone. Sunshine, it can shine on everybody, and there's always room for sunshine for more people. And I really believe that that the I believe our community has the great potential to run as a community of sunshine, not as a community of pie. And I think that that cannot happen without a feminist approach to leadership, without a mindset that says, this is not about scarcity. This is not about there's only, 8 slices of pie and I need to grab one of them. This is, how do I pull people into the sun to stand in the sun with me?
I love that analogy. That's
Thank
really
you.
beautiful. I see some people are starting to direct message me questions, and please, I just want to remind people if they have questions to please put them in the chat, and I'm going to start to get to those soon. Just as you're talking about this empowerment piece, I know something that was really important to you from very, very early days, because I know we had a one-on-one conversation many, many years ago, was I need to pay these teens. I need to pay them for their contributions, for their writing, for their photography. Tell us a little bit about that adamant passion of yours that had to happen.
Yeah. So we pay each of our published contributors for their work, and we offer a stipend to all of our teen staff members. The first year that we did this, I had one of the teens write back and say, I'm not going to submit my invoice. I don't need this. I don't need this money. Now, I don't know what her situation was, and I don't know what she meant by that, but that wasn't really the point. The point was, and I said this to her, I believe it's a feminist imperative for anybody to get paid for their creative work, to get paid for their Jewish work, to get paid for their labor. And I think that for girls and women and other marginalized genders particularly, and I say this now, I say, you're going to spend the rest of your life people telling you you shouldn't get paid, right? What I want to set is an expectation that you will get paid. I want to set an expectation that you deserve to get paid. Now there are many ways in which we have values as human beings, and getting paid is one of them, right? There are many ways that we can celebrate people and acknowledge their value. Getting paid for your work is a critical one. And once we've set the bar at the age of 13, 15, 19 that you're getting paid for your work, then you go out into the world with the expectation of getting paid. Volunteerism is incredibly important. That is a separate thing, right? That is a decision that you're making to volunteer your time. This is labor that you have, this is your job. And we call them staff, right? This is their job. And I've actually had, and so we want to model for them that they should get paid for their work. And also, well, I want to remember, I have two things to say about this. Okay, one is that I had a young person a couple of years after she graduated, we had coffee together. And she told me that having gotten paid for her time as an editor completely changed her relationship with herself and her own idea of her value. And that she had been asked to bat mitzvah tutor at her synagogue, and she'd been asked to volunteer to do it. And then she realized that most bar and bat mitzvah tutors get paid and get paid really, really well. And she said, like, it's not that I don't want to volunteer my time for my synagogue. It's that for this particular skill set, this is a paid job, and for sure, if there are families who can't afford it. And she went back to her synagogue and she said, and she must have been 17. She went back to her synagogue and she said, if other people in this community are getting paid for this, I really need to get paid for this. And it never dawned on her before this that she should have gotten paid. I also have teens, and this is another side of it, who say that getting paid makes me understand that I'm a real writer or I'm a real artist. And I spoke to a lot of my friends about this who are writers and artists, and how they remember the first time that they got paid, it made them think, oh, I can do something that I'm passionate about, and I can do something that I love and get paid, right? And there's this idea, like, do it for your portfolio. What do you need to get paid for? You're passionate about it. I'm very, very passionate about my work, as you can probably tell. And I have a family, and this is real labor.
Yeah.
And the other reason that we want to pay them is because we want young women and non-binary people to become comfortable with talking about money. That the younger you get comfortable and not think that it's embarrassing or it's shameful or, let my partner take care of it, that has repercussions for negotiating salary, for asking for raises, for, if you want to start your own nonprofit or go into fundraising. It just opens up enormous doors. And it's something that so few girls particularly are taught to do, to be able to talk about money and think about money and understand what money, that you can't have ideology. You can't create the change you want to see in the world without money behind it. And if you can't talk about money, you can't create that change.
Thank you. We're running out of time and I'm almost going to wind up, but I want to at least ask this one question that someone messaged me about, one of the beauties of J Girl Plus magazine, much like the collective, is the diversity of the editorial board, geographically, religious denomination, sexual orientation, gender identity, all of it. And so you're holding a big tent. Are there times where, you're holding a lot of different views too, where that there's tension there? How do you navigate that? Specifically, you have Orthodox women participating, and then you may have, this idea of opening it up to trans, and there might be inherent tensions in some of the values there. And so how do you navigate some of those situations?
I see them as opportunities. We live, again, part of being human is having differences of opinion with people. And the younger, and I mentioned that one of the workshops we run is how to have productive civil dialogue. The younger you can learn to sit in spaces with people who are different from you and have conversations around different perspectives and different ideologies and different beliefs, and to keep those civil and to be open to learning from one another. I mean, imagine if we all had that when we were 15. If as we became ourselves, baked into that was not only a tolerance for, but a perspective of joy around this is an opportunity for me to learn something new, to open my eyes, to teach someone something else, not necessarily to have my mind changed, but to figure out how to engage and also how to compromise, right? I mean, I was just reading about the debt ceiling, right? Like, compromises have to be made in life all the time, and the earlier you grow a tolerance for it, and the earlier you gain the skills for it. And we have this on art, we have this around several issues on our board where there are real differences of opinion, and it's also part of the work, right? You receive a poem, and 2 teens in the poetry department love it, and 2 teens in the poetry department hate it, and 1 teen feels neutral, right? Like, amazing. Amazing. Figure out what you're going to do. And I also love that they're having the conversation in sort of more neutral than talking about, politics, which is so explosive. They're having it around a poem, and it's building the skill of something that they all care about and all feel passionately about, where the stakes are not, people don't see it as like the future of our country. It's a poem, and it's important, and we have deep respect for everyone who contributes work to us. And they're exercising that muscle, and we're giving them the skills and the opportunity to exercise that muscle. So I think that the more difference of opinion it is, the better the more opportunity we have to create the kind of leaders that we want to see in the world.
I love that. You're teaching consensus building, and they probably, it's amazing, and it's really important. We're running out of time, so I have one last question for you, because, as you're sitting here talking, I see so many parallels between the work you're doing with teens and the collective in terms of how the composition and some of the topics.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear about you and your experience in the collective, and how it's impacted your leadership, and what have you gained as part of this experience?
So I'm so grateful to be part of the collective. And I remember one of the questions that was asked was why do you want to join the collective? And I said community. I said, in a word, community. And I've received that. I have deepened friendships with people who I was already in relationship with. I have met incredible leaders and created new relationships, people who have opened my eyes and have taught me things and have challenged me in my beliefs and have pushed me to do the things that are hard for me. And again, it is with support. It's with the support of the Illuminate educators and board and staff, all incredible. Thank you. And there's a lot of learning. And I would also say, I mean, there's so many parallels, just as I said earlier, that we hear from our young people, that it's the community and the friendships. It's the same thing here. It's being a solo entrepreneur, social entrepreneur is it can be very, very lonely work. I work out of my living room. My staff is all over the country, the teen staff's all over the country, everything is virtual. And this is a community of people that I can turn to when a lot of days are a lot of days, because the teens I work with are incredible, are the most amazing. But then there are also the days where I just sit with my head in my hands and think, oh my God, how can I do this? And now I have people who care, with whom I share a passion for Jewish feminism. and a passion for social justice, along with people who have been on this road of building organizations. And that is absolutely invaluable. And, the parallels also in the kind of work we do, right? The collective is about building Jewish feminist leadership, and my work is about building Jewish feminist leadership. So I also take away a lot of lessons from my experience in the collective that I can bring to my work with teens, with the incredible, amazing teens who I work with every day.
That's so amazing. That's so joyous to hear. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your time, for sharing so much. Again, we could have gone on and on. I'm going to welcome back Rachel Siegel to close us out.
Sorry to be the one to have to cut the conversation short. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for taking the time to share your wisdom and your extraordinary work and story with us, as well as your experience participating in the collective. And certainly there are so many parallels between the two. And thank you, Rachel, for leading us through this conversation today. We don't have to hope that things will be different when we have leaders like Elizabeth to guide us. We actually can see and believe that it will happen. We're so inspired by Elizabeth's leadership and extraordinary story, and we hope that you are as well. If you've been with us before, you know that we always like to leave you with a few action items that you can take. Here are a few things you can do right now. We'll put them in the chat. You can buy J Girls' anthology, Salt and Honey, and encourage the young people in your life to sign up for Vocal Point, J Girls' new public speaking program. We'll put these links in the chat and we'll email you even more out tomorrow. We offer these sessions at no cost to you, but if you do find value in what we're doing, we hope you will consider 2 donations today. One to J Girls Plus magazine to support Elizabeth's work, and the other to Illuminate. Stay tuned for more information about the next conversation in this series and more programs to come. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you soon.